Hello, this is TurboDog702 for the Castlevania Symphony of the Night Any Percent tutorial. This is going to be the final entry for this incarnation of the tutorial, as it were. And really, this is just kind of a place for me to gush. This has been a long time in coming, quite frankly. But I really wanted to do something to kind of wrap it all together at the end of this, and as has been kind of something that I've been very passionate about lately, as far as archival stuff, remembering your history, things like that. I wanted to just kind of take a moment out and be able to kind of talk to you, the viewer, and express to you some of the people that have really been mainstays of the community and have really driven the run to be what it is, and to give some special thanks to some people that have made this game what it is, for both speedrunning, for me personally, and just as the community of gaming at large, quite frankly. So I'm going to go ahead and just go in, and this is no particular thing in here. I'm just kind of... I don't really have a script. Great, huh? Just kind of shooting from the hip here, talking about some of the things that have been around, and really some of the people that have been a huge impact inside of this community. I guess I would be remiss to not thank the people at Konami for bringing us this fine game. Konami, not the best of companies of late. A lot of things going wrong. A lot of people really disheartened by their business practices and the way they're treating their franchises. But quite frankly, if they were not around during the time, they would not have made this game and continued this franchise. And really taken it in, quite frankly, a very dangerous direction, shall we say. Like, you know, before this, Castlevania was Classicvania, and anything else was not Castlevania. And now it almost feels like this style of Castlevania, this open world 2D exploration Castlevania, is like the norm now. It's crazy to think how many games were actually produced off of this almost offshoot of the way that the game used to be played and the way people viewed Castlevania. So I did want to give a shout out on that. I did get the opportunity to meet Koji Igarashi, who is a co-director on the project. Not the main director, but a co-director on it, so it can't be said that he made this style of game, but he definitely proliferated it, and I'm glad that he was able to bring it to new and interesting places as well. But thank you for that. So let's jump into the people that actually should matter to you, right? I guess first and foremost, I want to thank Rom Scout. It's kind of a cliche thing to do, right? To thank the person that brought you into the community, but I remember the first speedrun I ever watched, and I didn't even know it by the name speedrun. It was just a video that said, like, Richter in 6 minutes and then 53 seconds, I want to say. Let me get a name on that also, because it's a pretty famous run. But the very first speedrun that I ever saw was a Richter Any Percent run. And I believe it was from Cyrell, who has a 714 on the Castlevania Symphony of the Night page. But I believe that's the first one I ever saw, which was... It's kind of interesting to think that, like, you know, when people think about it, they go like, oh, Mario 3 or Mario 1 or something that they really grew up with. You know, I'm a guy that grew up with the NES, in particular the next generation after that, the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. But that was the first one that I saw, and I remember seeing it inside of college, and that was kind of a big thing for me. Second thing I saw was, in fact, Super Mario Brothers. I believe it was the 458 run on SDA by Andrew WG. But we're talking more about Castlevania here, right? But even though that was the first speedrun I saw, I didn't really get into the speedrun scene until I went to twitch.tv. and I started to see ROM Scout playing. I went into the browse games, and sure enough, there's this guy playing Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and he has a lot of people watching, so I'm like, hey, I'll go ahead and see what he's doing. At the time, not even at the time I started watching, I think it was just after I started watching, they had just discovered that you could do the shop glitch using the sword, and then the fairy afterward, very shortly. So it was a really interesting time in Soten's history, I think. And we were still doing the wolf clip to skip Richter. I wasn't around at the time when they were using the relics to be able to jump over the trigger point, but I was there for the clip. So I remember how insane that seemed. But Romscott was the first person to really kind of show me what speedrunning was, if that makes any sense. The idea of actually seeing resets, not just seeing PBs. A person that was willing to talk. And, it's so easy to see people who aren't, maybe they'll talk about their game, but they won't really talk about it at length. Rom's one of those guys that when I was in his chat for the first time, like, he was always available to be like, yo, you're stupid if you don't know what shield dashing is. Not what he said, but like, if you didn't know what shield dashing was, or if that was something that you didn't know, he'd be there to tell you, like, yeah, this is something that you can do inside of the game. And I remember the first day that I saw him, I was like, wait a minute, you can backdash that fast? I don't remember that. So I sat there mashing backdash, not knowing that you needed a shield with it, or a buffalo star. And, yeah, that was a really interesting kind of experience for me, jumping into the community. And having that as kind of my jump-off point, shall we say. And after that, I kind of picked up on Mecha Richter and the speedrunning culture in general, which was really awesome, and has kind of fueled me to this day as something that I do for gaming all the time. So definitely a special shout out to Rom. Also the guy that brought me in for the Igavania Kickstarter for Bloodstained, which was a pretty life-changing experience, I would say. And to this day, I would say is probably one of the very few people that I would say... I'm not a guy that says that I have friends that often. Like, I have acquaintances, or I have people that are, like stream friendos, I call them. But, after enough time being around Rom and sharing a passion with him with this game, sure, I could say that Rom's probably one of my friends around now. And I'm glad to see him every time that I get the chance to, even though that's not often. Other people that I want to give a shout out. Mecha Richter, definitely second person that I saw. Guy that was pushing Richter for a very, very long time. Made the route kind of as tight as it was at the time, and is still a really, really strong run and a really, really good source of information if you're ever interested in that type of stuff. I'm really just looking through like the kind of the leaderboard in a way. I guess that's a good thing to point out. Shout outs to CV Speedruns, which is kind of a dead site now, but I did want to say thank you in particular to that site, and everything being crashed, so I can't see anything. Great stuff. Nah, that's kind of my fault. But oh man, I'm getting put on blast right now because I can't see who it was. Shout outs though to CV Speedruns, and holding on to it for as long as he possibly could without... Oh my god, no! We gotta find this. We gotta find this guy's name, this fine gentleman. Oh man, it's all over. Oh man, I look like a freaking idiot right now. We're digging deep to find this lore. Because quite frankly, my brain's failing me right now. In all capacities. Okay. So, now that I've caught it, special thank you to GT Tuna, who, he's had other stuff to deal with, so CV Speedruns has kind of been a dead place as a result of that, but I'm really glad he at least kind of consolidated the speedruns into a single place, at least for a short time. Currently, we're kind of trying to congregate more towards speedruns.com, but I'm glad that he was there to kind of pick up the slack when we didn't really have a place to host our leaderboards. Shoutouts to, man, so many people to thank. Shoutouts to Satoryu, super OG Soten runner, and I guess in the same vein, Reign of Soten, some of the early guys that really pushed this game to what it was. Satoryu in general, being somebody that everybody was like, man, shield dashing is impossible, and then Satoryu comes around and is like, no, you guys are just bad. But that was super interesting to see where the game has come from and where it's kind of leading to at this point. But those two guys in particular really kind of being the original OG members of this, even before ROM Scout, the guys that taught ROM Scout kind of how to do things and what he should and shouldn't do. Just really cool stuff. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Ben Outen, somebody who doesn't really play so much anymore, which is a shame. Probably, I would go out on a limb to say Ben was the best Soten runner for Alucard as far as consistency. That man was phenomenal, and he really showed us what was possible to do with the bat way, way before people were really keen to it. So I'd like to thank him personally. He got to perform at one of the GDQs in a race with Dragon Blitz, who's another person that I would like to shout out. Current world record holder for the game as of October 19th, 2016, although other people are kind of chasing his tail, that I'll mention. But Ben was really kind of one of those guys that showed you, like, he was probably one of the first people that I saw that was like, listen, just because something hasn't been done doesn't mean it's not possible. And it was awesome to be able to see him kind of innovate different things and kind of imagine different ways to do things. Another person who's should be connected with Ben, I think, is Desqual, a person that spent a lot of time kind of working on his own domain with the game, and I don't think can be overlooked. Fantastic player, doesn't really play as much anymore, but definitely was kind of like part of Ben's crew, which was cool. In that respect, I'd also like to shout out Zex, who was a very, very strong Richter runner, and unfortunately is currently not with us anymore. He's currently dead. Currently dead. That sounds so terrible. But he unfortunately died, and we do miss him quite a bit because he was one of the really, really strong Richter runners, and luckily before he passed on, he did actually go to a GDQ, and he got to show off what he was working on for such a long time for Richter. He went into an all bosses races with Mecha Richter and performed extremely well and actually won between them. Didn't die once either, which Mecha actually died a couple times. So that really shows just how brutal that category is and how good Zex was as a player to be able to perform at that high a level, at that level of competition with that much pressure, and still be able to come out on top, despite being somebody that maybe not as many people knew about. I'd like to give a shout out to Matako, who's I don't want to say he's an up-and-coming Alucard player, but he's a person that kind of arrived to the scene a little later than others. European player, very, very skilled in Alucard. Does pretty decent inside of Richter as well when he applies himself to it. I mentioned that it's not a foregone conclusion that Dragon Blitz is the world record holder, and Mitako's giving him a run for his money, and I think when Rom actually applies himself, he will be in that contention as well. But Mitako has done extremely well, and I wish him all the best in trying to chase that world record and his other goals. He's also a Final Fantasy runner as well. PKSL, world record holder for Richter at the time of this video. Extremely talented in basically any category that picks up. Even Alucard, he was able to be in top 5 contention very, very quickly, which cannot be overlooked. Like, this is not an easy game, and even though there are resources that weren't available before to get people better quickly, you can't overlook the raw talent that some people have for this game and the devotion that they have. And PKSL really exemplifies that, both in execution for Richter and just even picking up a new run with Alucard. Other people to talk about. Unfortunately, I can't mention his name, but I do want to get a shout out to our anonymous Soten runner. He is currently has requested not to have his name put down, but he has contributed countless strategies to the run and has had a fresh look on how we view the game. And probably altogether has probably saved somewhere around 20 seconds, I want to say, somewhere in that area. So even though he has decided to remain nameless, I don't want to have his contributions go unnamed, because he has done a ton for the Soten community over the last few years. Speaking of people who have done a ton for the Soten community in the last few years, can't forget the task community. Both Forgone Moose, who has definitely been the person who's been kind of the forefront of tasking this game in recent years, and really teaching new players and old kind of what's something that's practical for the run. And has been super willing to share his knowledge, even when you're talking about just doing a run in general. Like for charity marathons, he's done a lot of commentary, and I'm very glad that we've had somebody that's been as open as him inside of our community and willing to put the time in that he has. As far as other taskers, Pirate Sephiroth and Aracado, probably the old school taskers to talk about. Guys that really, Aracado at least, brute forcing a lot of the strategies that he found, but he did find them, and it's pretty sweet. Pirate Sephiroth putting in a lot of time in the Richter run. I'd also like to give a shout out to Sockfolder, who Sockfolder has done a lot for a lot of communities. For Soten in particular, he's kind of shown us what RSL is capable of. He's introduced the Ace route, the arbitrary code execution. That's kind of a niche category here or there. So that's been a pretty interesting thing to watch. If you're into glitching stuff and just kind of discovery of techniques or how they're found, he's a great guy to kind of talk to and pick his brain about. Other people that I want to shout out. Wow, just so many people to go through. Mouse, Wild Mouse. Very, very good Maria player. Used to play Alucard more, but he's really focused on Maria recently. But he's also done quite a bit with Richter as of late also. Be sure to check him out. I had a race with him and another runner that I'll mention now, I guess. Houseless Gamer at Californiathon. Houseless Gamer, a guy that's kind of done what he's been able to do as far as Soten, because he only has access to like emulator, and just having to push that style of run, that thing where you're not on the optimal platform, is something that's admirable, I think. In that same vein, I want to also talk about another runner, but I'll save that towards close to the end because I mentioned Rom Scout first, but there's actually another person that I think is equally impactful to the society of Soten, as it were. Let's see. Who else is on this list? Blacktastic, guy that's speedrun quite a few games, Mega Man 9 in general. He's done a little bit of Soten. It was really cool to see him. He said that Soten's kind of his first game that he's really focused on in order to get speedrunning. But he's always been willing to kind of put his hand in stuff. You know, he's been a very friendly part to the community, shall we say. And it's been really cool having him around, just the speedrunning community in general. Let's put it that way. Epically Epic, a person that showed me basically how useless shield dashing is, shall we say. Man with the slowest shield dashing speed at sub 8, but still sub 8s. Remember, kids, it's not about the speed of your shield dash, it's about consistency in all of your movement during your shield dashing. Be sure to check him out if you can. Kan Nozaki, creator of I Want to Be the Guy. Probably the first person that I really went and I was like, that's the guy I'm going to beat. Still, in my opinion, the metric for what you can consider a good run on Xbox. I think a respectable run on Xbox is sub 20. I think you aren't in the good category until you beat KN, which is an 1833. And he really kind of showed me what it was to at least know what you're talking about with the game, to kind of push something. And he has a great love of games in general, and he's a game dev. So it's been cool to see the way he thinks about stuff. Ozzy88 for pushing Soten inside of the European community. Volvanomics, I want to give a slight shout out for giving me a two-handed shield dashing method. Already talked about Disqual. Mid-boss, pushing the all bosses category. Dasabro, I want to give a shout out for pushing Soten kind of during a dark age where the only person that was playing was kind of Rom for Alucard, and he kind of came in and pushed Rom a little bit to greatness. Also a very, very strong runner when he was playing, fighting game guy, good execution, all that stuff. Also a cool guy if you get to meet him in person. Be sure to say hi to him. Jin Deathwalk for kind of proliferating Soten inside of the French community. Narcissa for showing Soten to a larger community, even if only for a short time. Let's see. Sakura Freak for representing a little bit of the Brazilian community. Shoutouts to the Brazilian community and the Japanese community. At least I haven't forgotten you. I have not. You guys are great. And I hope to see good things come out of you, and I'm glad that you interact. I would love to see more interaction between the Brazilian community, the Japanese community, and the English-speaking community. If anything else, I would love to see that. Dexter for pushing it inside of Europe as well. ZX for being a prominent glitch finder and just being supportive of the Soten community. Alucard X60 for being kind of a casual player in the game, but just somebody that I used to hang out with. Black Dragon as well, a guy that you're not going to see anymore on here because he changed his screen name. But when I was first doing Soten, me and him used to do kind of casual races, and I still remember that stuff. Even if it was a long time ago. Hagrim for pushing it inside the French community as well. I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's like Zen, like Zenny ZTW. Again, pushing it inside of other communities. Let's see. Anybody else? Sorry, I'm pausing the game when I don't need to. I have 1 billion health, I forget sometimes. Let's see, already covered all of those guys. Marsupial, a guy that pushed Maria in kind of the Dark Ages as well. Something that wasn't very popular, not just because it was, Saturn, so it's who has a Saturn to play it? But just in general, Saturn's one of those consoles that you really have to work with if you're going to progress and become better at the game with. And he did a great job at really showing what was possible on a Maria run, especially for the console version. So, I guess we're kind of wrapping up the main people that I wanted to talk about. But there is somebody that I wanted to give a special shout out to. Somebody that I think, even if we don't connect as much as I think as with some of the other runners, I would be extremely remiss in not mentioning him. So I mentioned Rom was one of the biggest influences in me starting the game, but probably one of the biggest influences in me continuing to play the game has been Talik Zealot. He's an Eastern European player. I don't want to say more than that. But he's an Eastern European player that I've talked to at length. And between the numerous people that I've kind of taught to play the game, he was among the first. And, you know, he doesn't really have an Xbox to play on, and by all accounts, from what it seems like, he doesn't seem too bothered by that. Like, he's fine playing it on emulator, on a keyboard. And he comes to mind not because he was one of the first people to see it, and not because, like, I think, oh man, you know, the best player in the game or anything like that, but something that really points out to me is he's always been somebody that's been extremely passionate about this game, and has been one of the people of late that has done his best to try and pick up new strats, learn new things, test the validity of certain theories that we used to have about the game, and really keeping us in line, if that makes a sense. It's easy to look at a game that seems to be solved with kind of clouded lenses, to have kind of tunnel vision on it. And I wanted to mention that that's something that's really important, is if you ever look at a game like it's solved, you're never going to get better at it. You're never going to find things that are going to be slightly faster, that it's going to be better. It's because of these things, especially when Sockfolder kind of jumped in, and like other people in general, that I've said, something is not possible right now. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be. And Talik's been one of those guys that's really pushed different strategies, you know, kept us honest, tested what is actually faster, you know, what's good, what's not. And even though he's a little bit bullheaded on the stuff, he knows what he's talking about, even if he's a little bit optimistic about what the best thing to do and what people are capable of and when it is. He's been a huge proponent of something that I've always said, which is to use strats that are appropriate to your skill level. You can always learn better stuff later. And it's been really nice to have somebody like that in the community. Somebody that's willing to share information, teach new players along with you, and really just show you, like, hey, why don't you talk to people about this? You know, this is kind of a better way to do it. Why don't you do this? Maybe he's not so nice about it. Maybe sometimes he's kind of gruff. But you know what? Like, the important thing is, in the end, when it comes to speedrunning, regardless of who you are, we're in this together. We're all trying to get better. We're all trying to beat the game at its own game. And it's been nice to have Talik and Rom and Dragon Blitz and Ben and Matako and these people that I consider to be integral. Forgone Moose. These people that I look at and they're like, these are the guys that are in it together with me. You know, these are the guys that keep me pushing forward. These PKSLs, these Mecha Richters, everybody that I mentioned here. Thank you, I guess is what I'm saying. And even if you didn't get the biggest shout out in this video, trust me, it's not forgotten on me. And hopefully when I remake this video for the new generation of Soten tutorials or whatever, I would hope that if I make it, I can do this better justice than I am now, and if somebody else does, I would hope that you are mentioned in their chronology of the speedrunning as well. That's really all I kind of wanted to get across. This is going to be the last video, I think, of the tutorial for, at least this incarnation of it. But fear not. The Soten tutorial is always in production, for better or worse. We will add new videos as new strats come out, and my hope, my desire is that I will eventually have enough time to reproduce this tutorial in a method that's a little bit more concise, a little bit nicer, a little bit better production values, and hopefully my desire is to have it in a few different languages as well. So maybe we can intersect with that Brazilian community. Maybe we can intersect with that Japanese community. Maybe we can get more Eastern European and European players involved. French players. Who knows? Anyway, this is TurboDog702 for the Castlevania Symphony of the Night Any Percent tutorial. Thank you very much. Hopefully you have enjoyed. And I'm glad to show you this game. Show you all the tricks therein. Thank you very much. Goodbye.